Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host, Alex, and I'm joined by Jem. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address. We are gamingthesystem@gmail.com. And we are going to be talking all about social deduction games. And some of you may be familiar with what those are, but essentially they are a game that involves a group of people, hence the social, and it involves some deducing, some investigation, some problem solving, hence the deduction, and it is a game because it's not real. So that kind of gives you a definition of social deduction games, and they take many forms. They can be like a party game, they can be a board game, they can be a video game. So right across the whole spectrum of what we like to talk about here on Gaming the System. And I want to kick off by asking you, Jem, how familiar are you with social deduction games in general?
Well, I feel like I'm quite familiar with them, but on the other hand, I don't think I've done very many in person. I don't think I've played very many in person, but I've watched Traitors, which has just finished, Celebrity Traitors, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that today. And I own a copy of Werewolf, which is quite a popular sort of board game version. But I haven't been able to play it because I haven't had enough people together at a time who've been up for playing it. So yeah, I think the thing is that it can take quite a long time, and people aren't always in the right zone for it. Years ago, I did a murder mystery party, which was so much fun, and everyone came as different characters. And I had hoped to host one for Halloween this year, but that fell through, unfortunately. So yeah, I think the thing is that I like the idea of them because they're sort of, well, to me, they feel like they're sort of a bit more of an accessible version of, say, Dungeons and Dragons or other role-playing games, because you're effectively playing a character. You're either a murderer or you're somebody trying to find the murderer, or whatever. So I feel like there is a little bit of role play in there, or there can be, and but it's not, it doesn't, you don't have to role play. You can just play it as a game. You can um just do it much more deadpan, much more straight. So I think it feels to me like an accessible introduction into role playing games. I think that's one thing. And I think I'm always really interested in like Traitors, for example, on the TV. I've just been really interested in how I've watched the normal Traitors and Celebrity Traitors, and I was just really fascinated by how there are certain assumptions made about how people are and how people might be, and there's a sort of an entire language that builds up around the game, within the game. And I think it's really interesting from a psychological perspective as well, like how it changes people being playing the different roles, even though they're obviously randomly assigned. And yeah, I just think it's a really interesting form of game, and it's a social form of game. And I suppose, again, it's a bit like, it links in, I think, to escape rooms. The idea of an escape room, I think, is a similar sort of thing. So yeah, I'm really interested to dig into them a bit more deeply today, and yeah.
Definitely, yeah. I really like how you kind of summed it up as a nice introduction to role playing. That's a really interesting angle. And yeah, I did think about how there is this crossover with playing a role because if you are, for example, the traitor, you have to cover up the fact that you're the traitor. So you do have to assume a sort of character. Whether it's also, you could be like in some examples for those of us familiar with the traitors, if you've watched, I think it was series 3 or at least 2 or 3, where people have come in and lied about something about them to the rest of the group. So, for example, I think it was Maddie was saying that she didn't say that she was an actress until quite late on, and it's when to drop that, because it's like I think she may have left it too late. And then people sort of started to suspect her more because she then suddenly revealed it. Then also there was that lady, I can't remember her name, but she was a priest and she sort of did a dramatic announcement about it.
Oh, yes.
Because she was worried about what people would think if she said she was. Then there was that lady who I think managed all the way through to cover up the fact that she was a soldier and said that she was a nail technician instead.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really interesting as well. So yeah, there's definitely some absolutely fascinating, like the ways in which that social groups work and operate and stuff, and our biases form within those groups as well. So yeah, we'll definitely come back to that point a little later on. But in terms of your very first memories of either playing a social deduction game or watching one, what can you remember going far back?
Oh, I'm trying to think like what a sort of early social deduction game would have been. I mean, because Cluedo is sort of one of the ones that comes to mind, but obviously you're not really. I mean, it is a deduction game, but you're not really.
For me, it was. It's funny. It's Wink Murder.
Yes.
In school and in like the brownies, we used to play it loads in brownies as well.
Yes.
And you'd all sit in a circle, and then one person would be the murderer, and they have to wink at somebody. Yeah. I can't wink very well.
I'm so bad at that game because I can't wink.
No, I can only do it with one eye, and then it's like really obvious because my mouth goes like that. So I wouldn't be very good at it at all. But yeah, and then people would die really dramatically, and everyone would get all. They'd be like, ah! And then they'd lean forward and die. But yeah, I think that's probably the earliest version I can remember. But that's really a really basic sort of version of things like werewolf or, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's the earliest one for me. But in terms of watching, I think Traitors has really revolutionised things in terms of being an actual, entertainment package. And introducing people to social deduction gaming in general. People are loving it from across all generations, and they might never have even heard of what a social deduction game is before Traitors. So I think it's really interesting generally. But I was relatively familiar with them in terms of like within the board gaming sort of world and party game world. I think before Traitors came along, I would play things like Secret Hitler. I don't know if you've ever played that, Jim. That one's quite fun.
I haven't, no, but I mean I've heard of it. I just haven't ever played it. There's
one person that's Hitler and then 2 fascists or more, depending on how many people play, and then the rest of you are liberals. And you have to stop the fascists from getting in.
It all feels a bit like currents right now, doesn't it? It's like, is it Secret Hitler or the US political scene?
Yeah, it's a bit on the nose at the moment, definitely. But you have like a voting mechanic in each round, and you have one person you choose to be your chancellor, and your chancellor has to your chancellor can help you by giving you the options to put down onto policy, and you have up to 3 cards basically, and you could lie and say, because you have to pick 2 out of the 3 to show to the president or whoever it is, or whatever. I can't remember the exact term. But basically the Chancellor picks out 2 out of the 3 cards to put in policy. And they could be 2 fascist policies, or they could be like a liberal and a fascist. So if someone puts down a fascist and says, "Oh no, I got 2 fascists, so I had no choice," but the person giving them knows that they'd given them a choice, they could be like, "Oh well, they're clearly a fascist because they've lied." It's that kind of thing. I'm still struggling to get my head around the voting sometimes, to be honest, because I'm just like, but it is generally based on whether you think someone's lying or not. So it's very similar in that way, definitely. Yeah, I mean, and there's one person that's Hitler as well, and you have to basically figure out who Hitler is and make sure that he gets killed by the end of it. So there's a couple of different things going on there.
So I think I would also struggle in those kind of games, because if I was the sort of the bad guy that people were trying to catch, I think I would just give myself away.
I find it very hard.
Automatically feel guilty.
Yeah, and because I'm so quiet, people either suspect that I'm just, not saying it because I'm obviously a fascist or whatever. Or, if I start acting out of character and going louder, people will be like, "Oh, Alex isn't normally that loud. Why is she being like that?" So I find it quite stressful. Genuinely. I think, because, you always think about when you watch Traitors, you're like, could I do that? I don't know. But I think I'd be terrible because I've got a very expressive face as well. Because, when it's really hard not to start laughing at things, I'd find it very hard, I think. Especially when Claudia walks around the circle. I'd be struggling not to giggle with my blindfold on. I'd just be like, oh. Yeah. It must be so intense though. Because I think they take away all their phones and things like that as well. And it must be very odd, definitely. But yeah. So did you watch Traitors right from the start? Or did you come into it late?
Yeah, no, yeah. I've watched the sort of non-celebrity ones, and I, to be fair, I often don't watch the celebrity versions of these sorts of things, because I usually find that actually the word celebrity is very loosely applied. And although I know that technically sort of social media celebs and reality TV celebs are technically celebrities, I just feel like if you don't watch those things, which I don't, then they're not celebrities. They're not people that the vast majority of people know or have anything to know them about. And I think what was really interesting with the Celebrity Traitors was that they were all people that I knew. But most of them, I don't know them. I don't know very much about them as individuals. I know the characters that they played, or I know the sort of public face of them, but I don't know them. So, and I think, in fairness, that was probably my biggest gripe about this season, in that I still didn't get to know any of them. There was nothing personal. Nobody discussed anything personal on TV. They didn't even talk about what their charities were.
No, I know. I thought that was a massive missed opportunity for those charities. Perhaps when they got voted out, they could have been like, "I was playing for X charity."
Yeah, but they didn't do that, did they?
Or whatever. No. Yeah, I think that was a real shame. I've since looked up who they were all playing for, and there were a couple of it was mainly cancer charities. There were a couple doing the same charity, cancer research. I think David the historian was doing a charity for greyhounds and one other type of dog, but it was something to do with greyhound racing, probably to protect them from getting abused or something, I suspect, but I don't know. But yeah, there was quite a range, really, aside from the cancer ones. But yeah, it was interesting. But I would have liked to have known. But yeah, that's a really good point, Jim. I hadn't even sort of really thought about the fact that obviously there wasn't really anything personal that we learned. And interestingly enough, because we actually watched this series, Tom and I, with another couple who we're friends with, watching it in a group is really interesting as well. But they've got us into Race Across the World, which has just started
Oh, I
its
love that.
other celebrity
Yeah.
series. And in that one, they do talk about really personal things.
Yeah, they
Like,
do.
did you see the episode with I can't remember his surname, but Dylan from Dairy Girls uh, and his
No.
mum. I won't say then, but he shares something quite personal, and it's really affecting and very emotional. And I had no
I think
idea.
yes, and I've
Yeah.
really enjoyed, and even on the non-celebrity versions of Race Across the World,
Mm,
they talk about some really personal stuff. Like I think it was the last season, and they had these two brothers who had
yeah.
been separated. They were like
Oh gosh.
they'd lived completely different lives because one of the boys had been sent off to boarding school, and the other
Wow.
one hadn't. And so the one that had gone off to boarding school had gone on to live this very kind of like business focused life. He'd obviously made a lot of money. He had, quite a sort of, to use old terms, like upper middle class lifestyle.
Yeah.
He had a big house, fancy cars, all of this. His brother, who'd stayed at home, had become a taxi driver, had done lots of different jobs, had never really held anything down, hadn't had a family, had
Mm,
had a completely different life. And both of them felt um, that the other one had abandoned them. They both felt that the other brother had abandoned them, and going on this race across the world adventure gave them the opportunity to discuss this that they'd
wow.
never talked about. They'd never
Oh.
talked about what had happened when they'd been separated and how much they'd missed each other and how that
Oh.
had been. And it was so lovely as part of
Yeah.
the show to watch this coming together of people
Mm,
as part of being part of a game and having to kind of work together
yeah.
collaboratively and all of that. That's, I mean, we talk so much on the podcast
Mm,
about the value of gaming together
yeah.
and how beneficial that can be. And it felt like, and in previous celebrity no in previous non-celebrity traitors,
Mm,
we've also seen a similar thing. And I know that, one of the series got quite vicious,
it
really,
did. It
because
did.
they were
Yeah.
talking about they needed the money, and they talked
Mm,
about why they needed the money, why they wanted the money. And they all had really good reasons. They all
yeah.
had really important things that they wanted this money for. So it really mattered to them.
Mm,
And subsequently, they they played hardball.
mm.
They played in a different way,
Yeah, it was
and
a lot more sort of people were more aggressive with each other, weren't they? Definitely.
yeah,
I
but
felt like there
also,
was a lot of maybe reputations at stake for the celebrity version. They don't want to come
yeah,
across as someone horrible because it will affect their career,
mm.
won't it? So
And I
yeah,
think
sorry,
that's
I
the thing,
interrupted you.
isn't
Go on.
it? It's different
Yeah.
when you're raising money for a charity.
Mm,
Then obviously there's a bit of a, like you say, there's your reputation at stake,
yeah.
but at the end of the day, a charity is going to win, and that's going to be good,
Yeah.
and like you said, that like some of them had selected the same charities anyway.
Mm,
So the motivation there to win is different than it is for the non-celebrities
yeah.
who are actually playing for money for
For
themselves.
themselves. Yeah.
And they had a personal investment in it in a different way than the celebrities had. But I do feel that it was a shame that they didn't they didn't air it. I
Mm,
mean, I cannot believe that you would have got that many people into a house together for all that time and them not to have any
mm,
personal
yeah.
conversations about, and yet they obviously chose to either
Edit it
to
out.
either ask
Yeah.
them not to have those conversations or to cut
Yeah.
to they cut all that stuff. And
Mm,
I just felt that that was a shame because I came away from it, and I do, there are people from that season that I really didn't know, that I knew from TV, but I didn't know very much about. And I was like, oh, actually, I quite like that person now. You know, I've seen more about them. I mean, Alan Carr is actually probably one of the ones that came out the best for me, because I've
Definitely.
never,
Yeah.
his humour does not work for me at all. And so I've had no interest in him.
Mm.
But I actually quite
Yeah.
liked him, and I have more positive towards him after seeing that, even though he
Good.
was like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah.
but I don't feel like I learned anything about them, and
No.
I think that's a shame.
It's an interesting choice. You wonder whether the producers were like, well, people already can find out lots about them if they go to Wikipedia or whatever. So we don't need to include it. Maybe there was a little bit, when they got to the stage where they have the dinner. That's always the part where they're like, how's your journey been on this so far? And they talk about, oh, I've had such a good experience, blah, blah, blah. But even with Kate Garrett, she did touch on obviously being a carer for her husband, which some people might not have known at all. But yeah, there wasn't really an in-depth conversation about it really at all. But yeah, that was slightly disappointing, because I guess you'd go in thinking, oh, what are they going to talk about? Are they going to maybe gossip about other celebrities, or all sorts of stuff.
I mean, that's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
bet
also
they
think
did.
it's interesting how they have this sort of mythology that builds up around this idea of like, you're obviously a faithful. You are a really good faithful. You're really on the side of the faithfuls. Or this idea that the traitors would be sabotaging the activities. It's because why would they do that? The idea is to get as much money in the pot, and so they would be doing the opposite. So instead of looking for the person who's sabotaging it, you want to look for the person who's doing that, trying their hardest to get it right, and I just think it's really interesting the way that in the absence of clear guidelines or clear signs, people create these sort of myths and these fantasy clues.
Some of the celebrities obviously were bigger fans of traitors than others. Some of them hadn't watched it at all, and I don't think they really understood what they were coming in for or anything. Especially the way they treated the shields as well. I think Jonathan Ross said it, like some kind of badge of honor that they could pass around to whoever they felt was most worthy. When actually in the non-celebrity version, people were holding on to those shields and they were not letting them go for love nor money, So I think that was really interesting as well, thinking about that. I think that might have been a reputational thing as well, but it is.
And yet they had such a go at Alan Carr for forgetting that he had a shield.
Yeah, but the reasoning was clear, because obviously if you had a shield, that does make sense. Yeah, it is interesting. But I guess they had to pick up on things. I guess the round table, I couldn't deal with that atmosphere, I don't think.
No.
It would be, I don't know how long they talk for either. Can you imagine, do you remember when Stephen Fry was just like, why don't we not talk? And just write down.
Yeah.
If they actually all had, what would the producers have done? Would they be like, no, guys, you need to have a conversation for the airtime. We need to have something on there. But theoretically, you could do. I think it's a good way of doing it, because then you wouldn't get swayed by anyone.
Yeah.
What you thought?
Or at least all the swaying would have to happen before, wouldn't it? In the conversations that they're having, which would be much more that would kind of be interesting as well, actually, if they weren't allowed to have that conversation at the table.
We were chatting about watching it with our friends, basically, while we were watching it. And one of them was saying his mum, she watches it, but always fast forwards to the challenges and completely cuts out all the chat in between. And we were like, but that's where all the exciting things happen, when they all talk to each other. But we couldn't understand how she would only choose to watch the challenges and then go straight to the round table.
Yeah.
It's just interesting how I guess different people take different things out of it and want to only watch certain bits. I thought that was quite
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I think that is one of the things that I would bring up about these kind of shows, is that they are time consuming. It's a lot of time investment that you're having to put in. Um, and it's one of the reasons why I don't watch a lot of the sort of reality TV
Yeah,
stuff, because, it's hours and hours and hours of time. And as you say, you can't fast forward and skip it, because then you're going to miss the
exactly.
key
Yeah.
moments where somebody gives themselves away or
Mm.
somebody says something. And so, yeah, you have to watch it all. And when I watch it, I watch it with my husband,
Mm.
and we're like pausing it every 5 minutes
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
bitch about the people. So, there is that. I think it takes us double the time anyway,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's quite an investment.
Mm.
So I can understand
Definitely.
that from that perspective. People sort of maybe finding it
Mm.
harder. And I think the same is true of the board game
Yeah.
versions of
Yeah.
these games.
You have to set
They
aside
are.
some time for it, don't you? Definitely. And indeed, the gathering of people for that is also an investment to have everyone gathered into one room. And then when we think about social deduction games in their video game format, perhaps the most popular and well known within gaming is something like Among Us.
Yeah.
I've never played Among Us, but I know that it had a moment. I can't remember how long ago it was. Was it during the pandemic that it was super popular? I can't remember, but it was
Yeah.
recent anyway. And
Yeah.
that's about basically, is it you're all on some kind of, is it a space station or
Yeah, it's like a
yeah.
space station. Yeah.
And one of you is a imposter, is that right?
Yeah.
And you have to go around killing people, and
Yeah.
then all the others eventually they'll have to vote on which person they think is the imposter, and they get ejected out into space.
Yeah.
I believe. Yes. And then, but that also involves people on voice chat. So you're not necessarily seeing people's faces, but you get to hear people, which is an interesting, because, it's thinking about the senses then as well, like the tone of voice. It's what you can deduce from someone's vocal features rather than their facial features as well.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.